displayed over the reporter's shoulder, he looked every inch the archetypal villain. A bald, hard-faced individual with a long scar down his right cheek. James first came across Sullivan while working with the National Crime Agency on a secondment. He spent several years trying to disrupt Sullivan's illicit activities, but had failed to bring him down. In the process, he made an enemy of the man and received several death threats as a result. Then 2 years ago, James had moved to Scotland Yard as a detective inspector with the murder investigation team, and was eventually assigned to the Brendan Fox case. Sullivan had fallen out with Fox after the nightclub owner banned him from entering his establishment. When their paths crossed early one evening at a pub in Wood Green, they ended up having a fist fight, after which Sullivan was overheard threatening to kill Fox. In the early hours of the following morning, Fox disappeared in suspicious circumstances after leaving his club. His car was abandoned at the roadside with the door open. Soon afterwards, police unearthed traffic camera footage of Sullivan's van driving past the club half an hour before Fox left the premises. Sullivan was arrested and Fox's blood was found on his shirt. His defence was that the blood had got there during the punch-up in the pub, and he claimed he was driving home from a night out when the traffic camera picked up his van near the club. It was James who charged Andrew Sullivan with murder, after convincing the Crown Prosecution Service to make the arrest despite the absence of a corpse. Then, much to the delight of everyone on James's team, the jury rejected Sullivan's not guilty plea. But 5 days ago, the case was reopened, and Sullivan's guilt was put into question when a prolific violent offender named Raymond Lynch confessed to killing Fox the night he vanished. He claimed he had tried to rob the club owner as he was getting into his car. When Fox resisted, he stabbed him in the chest. He said he feared that he might have left traces of blood or DNA on his victim, so he put him into his car boot and drove to woods in Kent where he dumped the body. Lynch had nothing to lose by confessing to a crime that James did not believe he committed. After all, he was already in prison serving a minimum of 30 years for beating to death a teenage girl in the weeks following Fox's murder. At the age of 55, it was unlikely he would ever be released. So James and his team were convinced that the Sullivan family had persuaded Lynch to confess to killing Fox, likely in exchange for protection on the inside. James returned from the kitchen with a glass and filled it with red wine, after topping up Annie's. He'd removed his suit jacket and shoes, and when he spoke his voice was stretched thin with tension. "You shouldn't work yourself up into a frenzy over this, Annie," he said. "I honestly don't think Sullivan poses a threat to us. He won't want to put at risk his newly won freedom." "But you can't be sure of that," Annie replied. "We both know the man's a psycho and he hates your guts. You've said yourself he's probably killed more than a few people over the years, and I don't want to become one of his victims. But I've told you so many times that it's not just about him. I don't feel safe here anymore. The streets are full of knife-wielding nutters. The traffic's unbearable, and so's the noise. I'm stressed out most of the time, which could be why I haven't conceived. And if we do eventually get lucky, this is not where I want to raise a child." James let out a breath. He'd heard it all before, and the issue had put a strain on their relationship. Annie's mother had died 18 months ago, leaving her the 4-bedroomed family home in Cumbria, and since then Annie had been trying to talk James into moving out of London. Of course, he'd given it serious consideration, even to the point of discussing with her the possibility of joining the Cumbrian force and basing himself in Kendal, which was about 25 miles from the cottage in the village of Kirkby Abbey. But James enjoyed working for the Met, and at 39 was still climbing the career ladder. It didn't help that his extended family, with whom he was close, all lived in North London. Annie didn't have any strong ties to the capital. Both her parents were dead and she had no siblings. Her only relative, an uncle who lived in Penrith. As a supply teacher, she could work anywhere, including the small primary school in Kirkby Abbey. As the evening wore on, James tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, but Annie was having none of it. She continued to express her fears as they got through another bottle of wine and a couple of ready meals heated up in the microwave. It was 10 p.m. when she finally decided to call it a day. Tired and frustrated, she stood and announced that she was going to bed. James hauled himself to his feet and started to help her clear up the coffee table. But they didn't get to finish the job, because at that moment a large object came crashing through the living room window. Annie screamed as they were both showered with shards of glass. The object? A brick.